My ex-wife was rejected on a blind date, and the moment I watched it happen from across the diner, I set down my coffee, walked over, and asked the only 4 words that could change everything. Can I sit here? 2 years ago, I signed the papers that ended our marriage, and I told myself I'd made peace with being just the man who used to love Nora Foster. But peace is a fragile thing at a back booth table on a Tuesday night, because there she was in a green dress I'd never seen, sitting across from a stranger in a gray jacket who wouldn't even look up from his phone. She kept gripping her purse strap like it was the only railing on a sinking ship. She didn't know I was there. She didn't know I'd watched her flinch when the man leaned back, glanced at her like she was a mistake, and said the cruel thing that made her go still. I knew that stillness. I'd spent our whole marriage trying to reach the girl underneath it, the one whose father taught her that love arrives warm and leaves cold, the one who pushed me away first so I could never leave her the way he left her mother. She rejected our marriage before I could prove I'd stay. And now a man who'd known her for 40 minutes was rejecting her too, in public, in the diner that used to be ours. So why did I get up? Why, after 2 years of silence, was I crossing the floor toward the booth where my ex-wife sat alone and humiliated? And when she finally looked up and saw my face, the last face she ever expected, would she let me sit down, or would she reject me the same way she rejected everyone who ever tried to stay? Here's what the gray jacket man had said. I heard it because the diner had gone quiet the way rooms do right before something breaks. He said, "Look, you seem nice, but your sister didn't mention you came with this much baggage. Divorced, a little sad, kinda quiet. I'm looking for someone lighter, like she was a suitcase he didn't want to carry." I watched Nora's lips part. No sound came out. 2 years, and I still knew every weather pattern of her face. And this was the storm she hid best. The one where she folded all the hurt inward so nobody could see it land. She nodded, slow, like she agreed with him. Like she'd been waiting her whole life for a stranger to confirm the thing her father taught her at 6 years old. That she was too much and not enough, both at once. The man slid out of the booth. He dropped a 10 on the table for a coffee he'd barely touched. And he left her sitting there in a green dress she'd probably spent an hour choosing, in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease and rain coming in off the street. My grilled cheese was getting cold. My permit drawings were spread across my own booth 2 tables down. Every reasonable voice in my head said the same thing. Stay out of it. You're the last person she wants to see. You'll only make it worse. But there's a difference between the man you were and the man 2 years of silence can build, and I'd spent those 2 years learning the difference. I'd sat in a small office once a week across from a woman named Dr. Reyes who asked me hard questions. I'd learned that loving Nora had never been the problem. The problem was that I used to chase her when she ran, and chasing a frightened person only teaches them they were right to be afraid. So I didn't chase. I just stood up. The floor between us felt a mile long. The waitress caught my eye from behind the counter and froze with the coffee pot in her hand. Because Dot had been serving us both for years and knew exactly who that woman in the green dress was. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't, honey." I kept walking anyway. Nora was looking down at the $10 bill the man had left, turning it over with one finger like it was a note in a language she couldn't read. Her eyes were wet, but nothing had fallen yet. She was good at that. She'd had a lifetime of practice not letting things fall. I stopped at the edge of her booth. My heart was going so hard I could feel it in my teeth. And I said the 4 words. "Can I sit here?" She looked up. I will remember her face for the rest of my life. First, nothing. Just the blank surprise of a voice she hadn't heard in 2 years. Then recognition hit, and it moved through her like a current, and a dozen things crossed her face all at once. Shock, shame because I'd seen. A flash of something soft she killed before it could grow. And then last, the wall, the one I knew so well, sliding up behind her eyes like a steel door coming down over a shop window at closing time. Caleb. My name came out of her like a question she didn't want answered. "What are you? How long were you?" "Long enough," I said. I didn't lie to her. I'd done enough of that by pretending for years that everything was fine when it wasn't. I was in my booth, the one in the back. I come here on Tuesdays. Her eyes flicked toward it and saw the drawings, the cold sandwich, the half-empty mug. The proof that I hadn't followed her here. That this was just my ordinary, lonely Tuesday, and she had walked into the middle of it wearing a dress for another man. Something in her crumpled at that, just slightly. You shouldn't have heard that. I know. I'm fine. She said it fast, automatic, the way you'd say it with your hand bleeding. It was a bad match. My sister set it up. It's not. I'm fine, Caleb. Okay, I said, and I stayed standing because I hadn't earned the right to sit. Not yet. Can I sit here anyway? Just for a coffee. You don't have to talk to me. You can tell me to leave and I'll go back to my booth and you'll never have to see me again. She stared at me. And here's the thing about Nora. She was always braver than she believed. Most people, hurt like that, would have thrown me out just to feel powerful again. But she looked at the empty seat across from her, and then back at me, and her chin did the small thing it did when she was deciding to be brave instead of safe. It's a free country, she whispered. I sat. Up close she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. There were 2 years on her face that I hadn't been there for, and I felt the weight of every one of them. The green dress had little buttons down the front, and one of them was done up wrong, and that crooked button undid something in my chest, because it meant she dressed in a hurry, nervous, hoping for a man in a gray jacket who'd called her baggage. Dot appeared like a guardian angel with 2 mugs and the chipped blue one she always saved for me without me ever asking. She set it down in front of me, gave Nora's shoulder a quick squeeze that said I've got you, and disappeared without a word. Nora looked at the blue mug. She knew that mug. We'd had its twin at home, once on a shelf in a kitchen that didn't exist anymore. You still come here, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Every Tuesday. Why? I could have given her an easy answer. I gave her the true one instead, because the true one was all I had left to offer. Because it's the only place that still feels like us. I know that's pathetic. I'm telling you anyway. She didn't laugh. She didn't soften, not all the way. But her hand let go of the purse strap. She set both hands flat on the table, the way you steady yourself, and she looked at me with those wet eyes that hadn't spilled, and she said the thing that told me how deep the water really was. He's not wrong, you know? Her voice was barely there. That man. He's not wrong about me. I am too much. You of all people know that. I drove you out of a marriage with my hands. I've been pushing people out the door my whole life so I could be the one who decided when they left. She swallowed. My dad did it to my mom for 20 years. Came home warm, left cold. Made her beg for the warm again. I swore I'd never be her, so I became him instead. I leave first. I left you first. There it was. The wound, out loud, in a diner booth, after 2 years of silence. The thing she could never say when we were married was sitting on the table between us like that crumpled $10 bill. And I realized the woman across from me had spent 2 years believing she was the villain of her own story. I wanted to reach across and take her hands. I didn't. I'd learned that too, that you don't grab a person standing at the edge. You sit beside them and you make the edge less lonely. Nora, I said, can I tell you something I figured out? It took me 2 years and a lot of help to figure it out. So just, let me say it. She went still again. But this time she didn't fold inward. This time she stayed, eyes on mine, waiting. And before I could say it, the bell over the door rang a second time. A cold gust of rain blew in. And a voice I hadn't heard in years. A voice that had haunted both of us. The voice of the one person who could ruin everything. Said her name across the whole diner. Nora. She went white as the tablecloth. Because the man standing dripping in the doorway, staring at the 2 of us sitting together, was her father. Her father stood dripping in the doorway, and the whole diner seemed to shrink around him. Frank Foster was older than the last time I'd seen him. Smaller, somehow, the way men get smaller when the thing that made them frightening starts to leak out of them with age. His coat was soaked through. His hair was thin and wet against his skull. But his eyes were the same, pale and quick and always measuring, always deciding what you were worth. He looked at Nora, then at me, then back at Nora, and something flickered across his face that I couldn't name. I didn't know you'd be here, he said. Nora's voice came out flat and small. I didn't know you'd be here either. I come on Tuesdays. He said it almost defensively, like he'd been caught. The rain. I just wanted coffee. And that was when I understood something that made the hair stand up on my arms. Behind the counter had already started pouring a cup. She knew his order. She set it on the counter at the stool farthest from everyone. One stool, no place setting across from it. Frank Foster came here every Tuesday too. Alone. The cold man who'd spent 20 years making his wife beg for warmth was now an old man who drank coffee by himself at a counter. On the same nights, in the same diner, as the daughter he'd taught to be afraid of love. Two lonely people who'd both run from the same wound. Circling the same room for years and never once sitting down together. Sit somewhere else, Dad, Nora said. Her hands had found the purse strap again. Please. But he didn't move. He stood there looking at her in the green dress, and his jaw worked, and then he said the thing that broke the script we were all expecting. You look like your mother. Nora flinched like he'd hit her. Don't, she whispered. You do. In that dress. She had won that color. Frank's voice cracked down the middle, and I watched the hard man I'd hated for years come apart at a coffee counter. I came in tonight and I saw a woman in a green dress, and for 1 second I thought it was her. I thought she'd come back. She's not coming back, Nora said. You made sure of that. I know. He didn't argue. That was the thing that shocked me most. Frank Foster, who never once in his life admitted he was wrong, said I know like it was the only prayer he had left. She left me 4 years ago. Did you know that? She finally did it. Packed a bag while I was at work. Left a note on the counter. 29 years. And a note on the counter. He laughed. But it was the worst sound I've ever heard a person make. She wrote, I spent my whole life waiting for you to be warm. I'm gonna go be warm somewhere else before I die. The diner was dead silent. Even the cook had stopped scraping the griddle. And the funny thing, Frank went on, and his eyes were wet now, the same wet eyes Nora had, the exact same. The funny thing is she was right to go. I knew how to leave a room cold. My father taught me. I never learned the other thing, the warm thing. And by the time I figured out I wanted it, there was nobody left in the house to give it to. He looked at his daughter then, really looked at her. I see you doing it too, Nora. I've watched you do it your whole life. You leave first. You go cold before they can. I know because you learned it from me, and I am so... His voice gave out completely. I am so sorry. I poured it into you like poison and called it protection. Nora was shaking. I could feel the bench trembling where her knee touched the table leg. And I sat there, and I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, which was nothing. I said nothing, I grabbed nothing, I fixed nothing. Because this was hers. This moment belonged to her and no one else, and the old me would have jumped in to make it easier, and the old me would have been wrong. She found her voice. Came out of her like something tearing loose. You don't get to do this, she said. You don't get to walk in out of the rain after 30 years and hand me an apology because you're lonely now. Do you have any idea what you did? I married a good man. Her hand shot out toward me, but her eyes stayed on her father. I married a man who was warm, who was patient, who never once went cold on me. And I burned it down anyway. Because of you. Because every time he loved me I heard your voice telling me it wouldn't last. So I made it not last, so I could be the one holding the match. She was crying now, openly, 2 years and 20 years all at once. I lost him because of what you put in me. And now you cry at a coffee counter and want me to feel sorry for you. Frank didn't defend himself. He just stood there and took it the way her mother used to take things, and maybe that was its own kind of justice, the cold man finally standing still in the heat. No, he said quietly. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I want you to not become me. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I eat here alone every Tuesday, Nora. Look at me. This is where it ends. This stool, this cup, this empty seat. I'm the ghost of what waiting too long looks like. His eyes moved deliberately to me, to the man sitting in her booth. You've got a good one sitting right across from you. I don't know how he got here tonight and I don't care. But I know that look on a man's face. I had it once before I let it die. Don't do to him what I did to her. Don't do to yourself what I did to me. And then Frank Foster did the only merciful thing he had in him. He didn't sit down. He didn't stay to make it about himself. He picked his coffee up off the counter, left a few crumpled bills, and walked back out into the rain, leaving his daughter the room to choose. The bell rang, the door swung shut, and it was just the two of us again, and the burnt coffee smell, and the rain ticking against the windows. Nora was crying so hard now that her shoulders shook. I reached across the table, slowly, the way you'd reach for something that might bolt, and I put my hand near hers. Not on it, near it. An offer, not a grab. "That thing I was going to tell you," I said gently, "before he came in. Can I tell you now?" She nodded, barely. "You said you're too much. You said you drove me out with your own hands." I had to stop and steady my voice. "Nora, you didn't drive me out. I left because I kept chasing you, and chasing a scared person just proves to them they were right to run. The marriage didn't end because you were too much. It ended because we were both kids carrying things nobody ever taught us how to put down. That's not a villain. That's just a wound. And wounds can heal. I know because I spent 2 years healing mine. And the whole time, the only thing I wanted was the chance to sit across from you again and get it right." She looked up at me, her face wet and wrecked and beautiful. "Why?" she breathed. "After everything I did. Why would you still?" "Because you are not too much," I said. "And you are not your father. And whatever that man in the gray jacket said, whatever Frank put in you when you were 6 years old, you are not alone in this booth tonight. You haven't been alone since the second I stood up." For one shining moment, I thought she'd reach back. I thought her hand would close over mine and the whole long winter would finally break. But the wall was 30 years thick, and old habits don't die because the truth shows up. I watched the fear rise in her eyes, the same fear that ran her whole life, and I watched her do the only thing she'd ever known how to do when love got too close. She grabbed her purse. She slid out of the booth so fast the chipped blue mug rattled. "I can't," she choked. "I'm sorry, Caleb. I can't do this." And she ran. Out the door, into the cold and the rain, in a green dress and no coat, leaving me alone in the booth that used to be ours. The old me would have chased her, would have run out into that rain and grabbed her arm and begged. But I'd learned that chasing only teaches a frightened person to run. So I sat very still with my heart breaking, and I made the hardest bet of my life, that the only way to prove I would stay was to let her go, and trust her to come back on her own. The rain came down. The door stayed shut, and I waited. The rain came down for what felt like 100 years. I didn't look at the door. I'd learned that too, that watching for someone is its own kind of grabbing, that a frightened person can feel your eyes on the door from a block away. So I wrapped both hands around the chipped blue mug and I stared into the coffee and I prayed the only prayer I had, which was just her name over and over. Dot refilled my cup without asking. She didn't say "I told you so." She just rested her hand on my shoulder for a second, the way she'd rested it on Nora's, and I understood that some people pour coffee and some people pour mercy and the best ones don't know the difference. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and I made my peace with it. I really did. I told myself that even if she never walked back through that door, I had given her the one thing nobody had ever given her. A person who stayed in the chair after she ran. A person who didn't chase, didn't beg, didn't go cold. I had loved her the right way for one single night, and maybe that was the gift, and maybe the gift didn't come with a reward. That's when the bell over the door rang. I didn't dare look up. I heard footsteps, slow and unsure, squelching in wet shoes. I heard them stop at the edge of the booth, and I smelled rain and cold air and the faint trace of her, and my heart was beating so hard I thought it would crack the mug. And then a voice, shaking, soaked, wrecked, alive, said 4 words. "Can I sit here?" I looked up. Nora stood there drenched to the bone, her green dress dark with rain, her hair stuck to her face, mascara running down her cheeks in 2 long lines. She was hugging herself against the cold. And she was looking at me the way a person looks at the one door in the world they're terrified to walk through and even more terrified to walk away from. I couldn't speak. I just slid the chipped blue mug across the table toward her, the way I used to 100 years ago, in a kitchen that didn't exist anymore. She made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob, and she sat. I got to the end of the block, she whispered. Her teeth were chattering. And it was raining and I was running, and I realized I was doing it. The exact thing. Running before anyone could leave me. Leaving first. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. And I thought about my dad on that stool. Every Tuesday. Alone. And I thought, that's me in 30 years. That's exactly me. Running out into the rain and calling it strength. She looked up at me, and the wall, the 30-year wall, wasn't down, not all the way, but for the first time in her life there was a door in it, and the door was open a crack. I don't want to be the ghost on the stool, Caleb. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of leaving first. Then don't, I said softly. Stay. Just stay. We don't have to fix anything tonight. We don't have to fix anything this month. You can stay in the chair scared. I'll stay scared too. We'll just be scared in the same booth. She laughed for real that time, wet and broken and beautiful, and she wiped her face with a paper napkin, and she said the bravest thing I ever heard her say. Okay, she breathed. I'll stay. It didn't happen all at once. I want to be honest with you because the truth is better than the fairy tale, and Nora deserved the truth. We didn't fall back into each other that night. We didn't kiss in the rain and roll the credits. We sat in that booth until 2 in the morning, drinking coffee, talking the way we never could when we were married. Slowly, carefully, telling each other the things we'd been too scared to say the first time. And then I walked her to her car and I didn't ask for anything, and she drove home alone and so did I. But the next Tuesday she came to the diner. And the Tuesday after that, she started seeing someone. Not a man, a doctor, the same kind of quiet office where I'd done my own slow unburying. She sat across from a woman once a week and finally said out loud the things she'd carried since she was 6 years old. Some weeks she came to the diner after, hollowed out and raw, and she'd just sit across from me not talking. And I learned that being a safe place sometimes means being a place where nothing has to be said at all. She called her mother. They talked for the first time in years. 2 women who'd both spent their lives running from the same cold man, learning how to be warm again. And she did something I never expected. One rainy Tuesday, she walked into the diner, and instead of sliding into our booth, she walked to the counter, to the loneliest stool, the one at the far end, and she sat down next to her father, and she ordered 2 coffees, and she stayed. I watched from the booth. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw Frank Foster's shoulders shake, and I saw his daughter put her hand on his arm, and I understood that forgiveness isn't a thing you feel, it's a thing you do over and over until the cold finally lets go. The seasons turned. The green dress came out of the closet again, on a night that had nothing to do with a stranger in a gray jacket. We took it slow, achingly, deliberately slow, because we'd learned that the things you build fast fall fast, and we were never going to fall again. And then came the Tuesday, almost a year later, when I got to the Bluebird first, and I asked Dot for the chipped blue mug, and I dropped something small into the bottom of it before she poured the coffee. Nora came in out of the autumn dark, and she sat down across from me in our booth. And she reached for the mug the way she always did now, both hands warming them. And she felt something at the bottom. She tipped it, and the ring slid out into her wet palm. The same ring I'd given her a lifetime ago. The one I'd never been able to make myself sell. She went very still. But it wasn't the old stillness, the folding inward kind. This was the stillness of a person standing at an edge and choosing, for the first time in her life, to step off it on purpose. I took her hands across the table. This time I didn't reach near them. I held them. I'm not asking the scared woman who ran out into the rain, I said. I'm asking the brave one who walked back in. I know how to stay now, Nora. I've spent 2 years proving I can sit in the chair. So let me ask you the only 4 words that ever mattered. The first words I said to you in that booth, except now I'm asking them for the rest of our lives. My voice broke. I let it. Can I sit here? Forever. And the woman who had spent her whole life leaving first, the woman who'd been taught that love arrives warm and leaves cold, the daughter of the ghost on the stool. She looked at me with her wet eyes and her whole open face, and she didn't run. She closed her hand around the ring. Yes, she said. Stay. Stay forever. We were married again the next spring, in a small backyard on a warm day. Her mother cried in the front row. And in the second row, in a pressed suit that didn't quite fit, sat an old man who had learned the warm thing too late for his own life, but not too late to walk his daughter across the grass and place her hand in mine and whisper, "Don't ever go cold on her." I promised him I wouldn't. I never have. We still go to the Bluebird every Tuesday. Same booth. Same chipped blue mug, except now there are two of them side by side. And sometimes, when the rain comes down and the door opens and some stranger walks in looking lost and lonely and rejected, Nora watches them the way I once watched her. And I know she's remembering the night her whole life turned on four small words. Because here's what we learned. The two of us, in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and second chances. The cruelest thing anyone can make you believe is that you are too much, that you are baggage, that you are alone. But you are not alone. Not when you're rejected. Not when you're neglected. Not when everything you tried to build has burned to the ground and you're sitting in the wreckage in a green dress, certain that nobody is coming. Someone is always one booth away. Sometimes they're already there. Sometimes they're just waiting for the courage to stand up and cross the room. So let me leave you with this, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer, because most people get it wrong the first time. If the person you ran from 2 years ago walked back into your life on the worst night of your year, sat down across from you, and proved they'd been waiting the whole time, would you finally let them stay? Or have you, like Nora, spent so long leaving first that you've forgotten you were always worth staying for? Think about who you ran from. Think about who's still one booth away. And maybe, before it's too late, before you become the ghost on the stool, go let them sit down.